What the hell?
I know who you are, Peter Quill, and I am not some starry-eyed waif here to succumb to your pelvic sorcery.
That is not what's happening.
Hello and welcome back to A Stark Contrast, where we discuss the differences and similarities from Marvel Comics to their MCU counterparts. And we are your hosts, Geoffrey
and Dai.
Hello, and welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back. Sheesh. What is time?
I have lost all track of it.
I have no idea what day it is. It's definitely rushing on in.
Yeah.
Summer is approaching very swiftly.
Very.
It's still technically spring, right? Because, you know, anybody that lives in California, like,
I don't know when the seasons start or stop.
It's been wonky. It's been wonky lately. And so I think we're kind of still in this weird groove of like, it's going to be scorching hot and then it's going to be super duper cold for no reason. And
yes.
And so I think by June, it's just going to go full blown summer, I'm sure.
Yes.
But with summer comes a lot of awesome stuff.
Oh, yeah.
All the blockbuster stuff is coming real quick. But, you know, before we start talking about the Marvel ones, just a final reminder about our first live official appearance at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. If anybody checked the link last time with our last episode, it wasn't live yet, but now it is officially live. Mm-hmm. You can see our dumb faces on the website.
It's so stupid.
It's so weird. I even commented on like when I approved the images. I was like, this podcast doesn't seem really reputable, but I approve of the graphic. And of course, it's Geoffrey and my dumb face and our cute little chibis and our amazing logo made by Cody. But yeah, check it out. nhm.org/First Fridays. And we also have the ticket link in our show notes. So please join us on Friday, June 2nd, 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. Woo. Pretty great evening. So yeah, come out and join us. But yeah, so speaking of summer blockbusters, Secret Invasion is dropping all over the place. Like
teasers.
I mean, is the newest one that dropped today just like that camera view? And it's just who can you trust or whatever it said.
What if the person you trusted most wasn't even human?
Yeah.
So and I was like, yes, my best friend is a dog.
There you go. I know mine is a cat raccoon.
Can we trust these two in this room right now?
Exactly. So that's really exciting. And yeah, they almost immediately dropped stuff like the minute Guardians Volume 3 came out. So it's full speed ahead officially. And, you know, like with Guardians, like kind of sunsetting their promotional time frame because Spider-Verse is coming up real quick too.
Yes.
And, you know,
very fast.
It's Marvel adjacent more or less at this point, but whew. So it's like 100% going in that direction. And of course, as well as the Marvels, which we haven't yet seen more of just yet, but I'm sure the closer we get to June, July,
yes,
more and more stuff's going to be raining from the sky and it's going to be wild. And speaking of wild, two things that popped up just yesterday, both Loki and Echo on Disney Plus have officially been announced with release dates on October 6th for Loki season 2. And that's just it beginning streaming, which is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Because they're making you tune in every week. Whereas Echo will be streaming in its entirety on November 29th. So
I wonder what the decision was for that, specifically for Echo.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
I feel
like I know why.
Yeah.
But
why do you think?
I just feel like I care about Echo. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah.
But I think from what I've like seen on Twitter,
sure,
like, people are just like, why do we need this series?
Of course.
And it's like, dude, who cares? Enjoy it. Alaqua Cox is amazing, and I'm excited to see that, especially like for like her journey in that show.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because to just be like, this is how it is. Like, here it is, and then
it's more of a supplement.
That way they can get like immediate feedback.
Yeah.
Of the show.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of that, personally speaking. I do feel it is more of a supplemental series than it is like you have to watch it to connect A to B to C.
Sure.
But also I think it might be a timing issue. Because, you know, like the time frame was supposed to be much sooner than it is dropping now. And with Daredevil and all that stuff happening.
I mean, that's on pause right now, too, because of the
strike, which is also unfortunate. So go support the WGA and all that good stuff. But yeah, I wonder if that has anything to do with the subsequent releases. And so they're just like, let's just close out 2023 season with Echo, and then the new year it's full speed ahead. But yeah, I guess we'll see. I mean, things are dropping left and right as far as leaks go for other things, but I've not yet seen anything else from Echo for a long time.
No.
Because now we're seeing the Captain America stuff emerge.
I have seen some stuff.
Yeah, I saw a couple things and I was like, okay. But yeah, so I'm still excited, still very excited to see that. Both of them really, and see where Loki goes as far as that storyline goes. And so again, Marvel adjacent, not necessarily with the MCU, but on brand for this particular episode, it looks like they've officially pulled Gamora from Avengers Campus. So she is no longer there, which makes me very sad.
Just like Thanos did.
Just gone.
Pulled her.
You suck.
Never going to get tired of that.
Gosh, jeez. But they have replaced her with Mantis, which is really cute. So if you go on the Guardians social outlets, they've posted a video of Palm and the actress from Avengers Campus, and they're super cute. But yeah, I'm kind of sad about Gamora. I wonder if they'll bring back any other character from in that capacity. But
maybe there'll be an Atom.
I don't. That's a lot of face paint, but we'll see. And so, yeah, before we roll into this, I wanted to show you these awesome things, and I'll post these on social because that's what I do. But so I talk about how awesome Disney Movie Insiders is, right? And so like the framed poster behind you, which is the teaser poster for Volume 3.
Yes.
But because like I cash in on my points and I do all the little quizzes and stuff, I accumulated like damn near 8,000 points, right?
She does, guys.
Yeah, I got them all, man. And so thankfully they dropped a bunch of Guardians. I got every single Guardians thing, at least that's like super duper limited or like exclusive.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to show them to you, Geoffrey. So for I don't know how many points, I got this amazing,
oh, that's really cool,
Ravagers logo, Guardians logo hat, which is super dope.
That's cool.
Isn't that cool? Yeah. And it's like stuff you can't buy.
Yeah.
And then I got this limited edition
keychain. That is cool too.
But my favorite thing of all of the things that I've gotten is these things just arrived today, by the way. And it even says like it's an exclusive, and it says only in theaters, so it's not something they're going to sell. It's a promotional item. Oh. And so this is a like faux leather case that inside, if you open it, it's got the emblem of the Guardians themselves, and it's almost like a police badge. Yeah. It's really cool. God. Yeah, it's like metal. Oh. But it's a pin. It's funny enough. It's a pin. That's a pin.
There's a whole freaking badge.
He's trying to get it out.
Get it out. I got it.
Yeah.
Oh my God, there's some weight on this thing.
Isn't it cool?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You could probably throw it like a ninja star and kill somebody. But yeah, some super, super cool stuff. So if you have seen the films lately and you don't know what Disney Movie Insiders is, check it out. You get points just for watching movies or buying movies, whatever. You get free stuff. It's awesome. And so that said, oh my gosh, we can roll into this episode. Woo. And as always, we are not experts. We don't claim to be. We're just a couple of nerds nerding out. And if you haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and are sensitive to spoilers, fair warning, this is going to be full of them. And so very quickly, speaking of Volume 3, we ran a poll on social to see how many people cried during the film.
I responded to that.
And would you believe someone had the audacity to vote that they didn't at all?
Wow.
Soulless creature. I don't believe that at all. There's no way.
They don't deserve nice things.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding. Whoever,
not even.
I'm sorry. I don't mean that.
But nearly 60 people across platforms said that they did, and a few times, which tracks, because I feel like they got broke.
I was talking to my coworker the other day when I was at the office, and he said he watched it, and I was like, I was like, he was like,
Give him a look.
I was like, it was heavy, huh? He was like, yeah.
Is that the subtle nod of I cried, bro? Yeah. So yeah, that I went to go see it a fourth time.
Oh my God.
I went back for more like a masochist. So I went on Mother's Day because I had
Mother's Day.
I know. My mom doesn't live here, so I had nothing to do per se, right? But as much as I could have just stayed home and just not done anything or just done something else, I was like, I'm going to go see a matinee of Volume 3. And I was like, I'm good. It's fine. I've seen it 3 times. What's it going to do to me? And I immediately started crying. Like the beginning, just the beginning alone, I just started crying.
Yeah.
And then I was down all the way through Creep until Adam Warlock comes in.
Yeah.
So that's like that entire stream of the film. I'm like just bawling.
That's fair.
And then I stopped. And then I just, you know how it goes for the rest of the film.
The same emotions.
Awful. Yeah. It was just, Jeff and I were talking about it before we recorded, and it was just awful. It's so sad.
Very.
But you know what else is sad is not seeing this character that we're going to talk about today ever again. She has more than likely met her final stage with the MCU. But that said, today's character study is on the one and only deadliest woman in the galaxy.
Woo!
Gamora.
Gamora.
Who is Gamora?
Balls.
I didn't like how he said that. Like, it was like, why are you saying that, Thanos? Why are you my Gamora? Like, what did Peter say? He was like,
he's like,
nope.
No, he was like, I gotta censor this. He's like, Thanos is like, Gamora, my Gamora, no bullshit.
That's right. Oh, Peter Quill. And so Gamora herself, created by Jim Starlin. And so if you revisit some of our other episodes with the galactic characters in particular, Jim Starlin is like the man of the hour when it comes to the creation of all of them. And so same goes for Gamora. Who appeared in Strange Tales number 180, cover dated June 1975. And so, of course, in true fashion, Geoffrey, I wanted to pull the issue out. I do have this one hard copy, pretty dang good quality in my collection, but I forgot to go get it. So do you want to take a stab at the cover price first and foremost? And it features a character that we're very familiar with now, Warlock.
What is that enemy though? It looks like a
I don't remember what this one is called.
Looks like a reptilian MODOK.
Yeah, pretty much.
This is first appearance?
First appearance of Gamora, yes.
Oh, you want me to
guess the cover price. I've marked
you have
it out.
Covered.
Yeah.
Oh. What did I say last time? Okay, I think like one it was like 5 cents, and then the last one was like 10 cents. And I had guessed 25 cents, but I was like, ugh.
Yeah, I think it was the Professor X one, right?
And this is 1975?
Yeah.
Inflation, man.
Inflation, disco era.
Can I go? I'm going to go big here.
Okay.
Can I go 15 cents?
15 cents. You know, that's not bad. It is incorrect, but not bad, because the actual cover of the actual cost of this cover price was 25 cents.
I'm going to murder this. Oh my God.
Wild, right? So it's 1975. 25 centavos.
The one time I don't guess 25.
So this issue, despite it being pretty, I don't want to say modern at all, but you know, it features a character that is very popular at the moment. It's not as much as you would think. The highest on Shortboxed, I found a CGC 9.6. It's going for $900.
9.6?
9.6, yeah, for $900. On eBay, CGC 9.8 for $6,600. So a 0.2 difference, almost like 8 times the amount of on Shortbox. So I'm not sure how or why that happened, but there's a difference there.
I want to meet someone who collects this stuff and like see how much money they've made.
Invested. Oh, and made.
Invested, but then also like made too.
Yeah.
Because this is insane. Like every time I see these numbers for whatever we do, whatever character we do, I'm like, I could pay this. I could pay this. If I had that much money,
exactly.
I would pay this.
And some people have doubles, triples, quadruples. That's the wildest part to me.
How do you know something's gonna last this? Oh,
gosh. It's intense. And then of course, you know, the lowest on the low spectrum, Shortbox had a CGC 6.5 for $155. So it's like a fair condition. It's not super great, not super bad, but it's something if, you know, just a casual collector that just loves Gamora. Whereas on eBay, same 6.5 for $99. So less than $100, you could get it there. And then of course, loosey gooseys, they start around $50. They go upward after that, depending on how great they are. But I will say this on eBay, in particular, I found something that I've never seen before, at least when looking for the comic book issues of the characters that we have covered. But there was this very special edition of a graded comic of the Strange Tales. And it was graded as a Susha News pedigree grade of 9.8. And that alone was $10,000. So I had to look it up because I was like, I've never been exposed to this pedigree grading before. And so I found on CGC's site, they note that the pedigree essentially is an item that has been graded, and it's a collection of exceptional value and quality graded comics and games and whatever have you. And it just receives a pedigree ranking. So it was part of a very intense collection of comic books that all were above 9.5 or were nearly 10 points. Who knows? And so it came from that collection. And just because it was in that collection, it's worth $10,000. So that's a whole new world that I was exposed to. I was like, wow, that's pretty awesome, actually. But my goodness. So you can either get it for 50 or you can get it for 10 grand. Who knows?
Your choice, people.
Yeah. So, what is your first exposure to the character?
I mean, it has got to be, it's got to be
film?
Guardians. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
That's it, right?
It has to be. I can't think of any other time.
Yeah, for me,
so shout out to James Gunn for making the Guardians a household name.
Quite literally too, right?
Yeah.
Because like, you know, and we've said this many, many, many times, like my friends and I growing up, we were barely exposed to the Guardians of the Galaxy, let alone this version of them, like the version that everybody knows and loves now. But it was really James Gunn and his film that brought them to the level that they are now. Like, you have to think about it. These characters in their time were not necessarily a group of characters that ranked with the likes of like X-Men.
Yeah, they
like
were
just not
DC-list characters, right?
Absolutely, 100%. And so as a result, it was like everybody questioned, like, why would you hire this dude who's done like Slither to handle a movie in this growing universe?
Yeah.
And you're choosing that team?
And so I think the story is Feige like approached Gunn to be like, do you want to do a Marvel film? And I think Gunn was like, can we do a Guardians film? And then, you know, kind of hats off to Feige for being like, yeah, go for it. Like, see, you know, and like obviously he probably did the whole pitch and everything. Yeah. But then they're like, all right, yeah. And
and it's worth saying that like, Gunn himself seems to be like he favors offbeat characters.
Yeah, because he'll make you fall in love with them, and here we are 9 years later.
Exactly.
From the first one.
Yeah.
And they're just all household names.
Every single one. Every single one. Which is so bizarre. Yeah. I want to say I knew about her because of Infinity Gauntlet. And so I had an idea of who she was. She didn't play like a major role for me when it came to Marvel characters. But yeah, undoubtedly, like I didn't really get to know her until the resurfacing before the movie dropped. So around 2012, 13, that's when they started to say, oh, Guardians of the Galaxy is in the works. I was like, okay, let me figure this out. And so I bought the new series that was released just before the movie. And then I backtracked from there, and I familiarized myself with the character. And so I know a very modernized version of her, whereas the classic character, like we're going to talk about today, she's definitely like almost, I don't want to say night and day, but she is more reminiscent of the Gamora that we get to know in the final film. And so, you know, as far as trading cards go, the story is the same with her as with many of the characters. I didn't have a physical card, but I do have a digital one. So I looked it up. And this is from my Topps digital collection. Gamora, raised by Thanos to kill the Magus. Gamora is a skilled assassin with enhanced physical abilities. She eventually works with Adam Warlock and later teams with the Avengers against Thanos. Gamora also guarded the Time Gem in the Infinity Watch.
Time Gem.
Yeah, so Geoffrey just gave me a look like, hey, it's like a buzzword, right? Time Gem. So
gem.
Yeah, right off the bat, the time gems are the Infinity Stones.
Yeah.
Of the comics. So they changed the word because Infinity Gems seems
okay.
The tonality and the context seems a little different. So yeah, they changed the name just very slightly, and Gamora was very much more entangled in the gems in the comics than she was in the films.
Got it.
So let's take it back a bit. And of course, before we get to that, we had we put out the feelers for questions. Of course, in true form. So many people were so funny, and Anson asked us, "Why is Gamora?" Like every single one of you.
So we didn't get one question about Gamora.
We barely got.
That's what you're saying right now.
Yeah, pretty much. We got like one comment and one actual question, but neither of them are actually about the character. Everything else was, why is Gamora? Everything else.
I mean, can we blame them?
I swear. I know. I was like, I opened it up. That's on me. I did that to myself at this point. So we'll hopefully answer why is Gamora in the next, God knows how long this will take us.
That's hilarious.
But so Gamora, the comic book character herself, not to be confused with Gamora from the Bible, which is spelled Gomorrah. It is a biblical reference, but we'll get to that later in the episode. And so Gamora, she's very much a unique character when it comes to the comic books. She's certainly one different from the characters we've covered, if only because her original timeline is not of Earth 616. So it's going to get a little weird and a little like we're going to flip around a bit as far as timelines and Earths go. But depending on which origin story you follow, Gamora, the character, is of Earth 7528 or 9223. And so the latter, 9223, seems to be the one that's more accurate. And I literally wrote on my notes, bear with me. So the overarching, idea is, and it is consistently, that Gamora was the last of her species. And so they once occupied this planet named Zen-Huberi. And so it very much surprised me because they mention Zihobere in volume 1 on her prison screen. It's the only time you see it. They never say the word throughout the entire series of the films until volume 3, when Aisha is on the Orgord planet thing, and she's trying to talk to the Ravager.
Yeah.
Before he's dusted.
Oh, yeah.
And she goes, do you know of a Zen-Huberi named, or Zihobere by the name of Gamora?
I didn't even pick that up.
Yeah, it's very quick because you almost don't, you're so like, I feel like you're so magnetized by the way that Elizabeth Debicki speaks.
Yeah. And
that they're like, oh, they're just shaking this guy down. That you're like, you don't even catch it. But she says it there. And so yeah, the planet's people were dubbed Zen-Huberians in the comics, and then in the film Zihobere, but they both derive of Zen-Huberi. And so they were basically this peaceful planet of people as depicted like in Infinity War, but an external species, alien race named the Badoon, invaded the planet and ended up massacring its people. And that more or less leaves Gamora as their sole survivor. And so it wasn't for a lack of trying. She just happened to cleverly not get killed. And being small and being a child definitely contributed to that. And so in the original timeline, it was a group called the Universal Church of Truth who exterminated the Zenhuberries. Does that ring a bell at all for you?
The Church of Truth?
Universal Church of Truth.
I feel like it should, but not like right away.
I'm going to just say Guardians of the Galaxy, the game.
Yes, there it is.
That's them.
Yeah.
So they, in the comics, were the original massacre. They were the ones who massacred her people. And so in the modern time, it was this race called the Badoon. And so the Universal Church of Truth worshipped a being known as the Magus. And this person, the Magus, was, like a legendary tale of sorts where he was a future human being who would inevitably be the end of Thanos, or at least the threat of his thirst for death and conquering death. Because if we know anything about Thanos, and we haven't covered Thanos yet, but it'll be very interesting.
Yeah. Oh my God, we haven't.
Because, because in the comics, and I think I mentioned this somewhere before, he is obsessed with the character Death in the books. And it's his partner, it's a woman. And so he's just obsessed with pleasing her. He wants to kill people so that she's happy. Jeez. And that's all he seeks to do. And so anyway, the church worshipped the Magus, who was going to destroy Thanos, who was destroying other people because he's trying to satisfy his lady. It's basically how this goes. It's all because of the lady, right? It's power and love.
It's always a woman, man.
It's always a woman, legitimately. And so, by the way, the Magus is Adam Warlock's future self.
Oh.
Yeah, so he becomes depends what your definition of bad guy is, but he becomes an omnipotent person in the future that's strong enough to take down somebody like Thanos. And so, anyway, current Adam Warlock, or at the time, the present tense version of him, fully unaware that he was going to become this person, let alone a deity to this cult, this church cult. And so the inevitable defeating of the Magus shifted the timelines. And so this changes course of Gamora's origin a bit, depending, like I mentioned. And so it resulted in the Badoon massacre instead of the Church of Universal Truth. And so as a result of all of this time traveling, changing thing, and I don't know if it was just a modernized version that they didn't want to pinpoint those kind of occurrences on something called the Universal Church of Truth. Maybe it's a little too on the nose.
Yeah.
Because you got to think back 70s cults.
Yeah.
It was
Very
probably
heavy.
Super duper heavy, super duper it was edgy at the time, but now if you said that now, it's a little different. So as a result of all of this, Gamora often recollects things from either timeline. So they've kind of amalgamated, both Earths for her in a modern sense. And so she herself is a temporal anomaly. And so I thought, when I was going back on this, I was like, dude, that's what she is in the volume 3. It's
kind of funny.
It's kind of funny, right? So I was like,
is that intentional?
I was like, James Gunn, you're a genius. Yeah, I don't know if it's intentional. That's the biggest question for me.
I think I doubt it, because in interviews he said
it had to have been a coincidence, right?
Because I think Gunn has said that, I didn't want to kill Gamora in Infinity War.
Yeah.
But which I get, because he's like, well, damn, you just killed one of my main characters. But it was also kind of
weirdly genius, right?
And needed though.
They needed something.
At least for Infinity War.
Yeah.
But that is just.
Yeah.
That's
so it's like she almost never existed, right? Think of it. She almost never existed. But then there's this version of her out in the galaxy. Yeah. And then Thanos snatched that version of her and was like, we're going to go kill this guy who might kill me. And then that whole act completely changed her origin in the making. And now she is in the main timeline. And it's just, she remembers things differently than the way people tell her sometimes. And so I was like, oh my God, wow. And so So after the Magus is destroyed, she's adopted, by Thanos along the way. And that's obviously before she was raised by Thanos, but we'll talk about that later. But she steadily earned her title of the deadliest woman in the galaxy under her adoptive father's care. So that's more or less, that's her origin. Boom. Bada bing, bada boom.
Yeah.
It could get really complicated if you think about it too hard, but honestly, that's pretty much it. It's like bad guy, woman in the middle. She got stolen from her home, and then
just trauma.
It's just trauma. Yeah, I should have just put trauma. Just a lot of trauma. And so before we get into the MCU version of the character, we got a listener comment from Super Fanboy Guy, our devoted DC fan. He says, Jessica Cruz from Green Lantern is the DCU's Gamora. Change my mind. I would love to change your mind. I don't think I can. So I would agree, I guess. I know, Jeff, you're not familiar with this character. She hasn't been I don't think she's been in the main DCEU yet. No.
Ever.
Yeah, but she's in a lot of the comics, and I think she just got a solo title not too long ago. But yeah, sure. We will definitely take that as a word.
As fact.
That is fact. Thank you, Super Fanboy Guy. So of course, Gamora, portrayed by Zoe Saldana, as well as Ariana Greenblatt as a child. First seen in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, last seen in Volume 3, both directed by James Gunn, featuring music from Tyler Bates and then John Murphy, respectively.
Woo!
Woo! So yeah, let's talk about Gamora in the films a bit. You know what I'll say that could blow your mind? I did not like her.
You didn't like Zoe?
I did not like Gamora. I was like Team Nebula. I was deep into Team Nebula. I was like, oh my God, the aesthetic. Oh my God, I love her. Oh my God. Thanks, Dad. Like,
thanks, Dad. Seems fair. Did you see that interview on how they got that voice and how Karen Gillan got that voice?
No.
So I think when they were first doing Nebula, Karen said James Gunn gave her direction of, oh my God, what was it? It was like, can you do it like this with a bit of Clint Eastwood?
Clint Eastwood?
Yeah.
Of all things.
Yeah. So it's like Clint Eastwood mixed with this other thing that I forgot.
Yeah.
But it's like with a bit of Clint Eastwood. And I was like, oh, that makes sense.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh.
Thanks, Dad.
That's her Clint Eastwood?
Yeah. It's a Clint Eastwood mixed with something else.
That's funny. I mean, yeah, considering how her real voice sounds. It's
she's Scottish, right?
Heavily Scottish.
Heavily.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So I was a Nebula girl through and through. And then I liked Gamora as herself in the film. But when they started to, and I say this a lot, because I always end up eating my own words a lot too. As they slowly started to kind of introduce the romantic side between she and Peter Quill, I almost immediately got defensive for both of them, right? I was like, she doesn't need a love interest. And I was like, him falling for her is stupid. And I didn't like any of it. And so when Volume 2 came out, I was still hard on I was like Nebula by Volume 2, right? And then I was like, here we go. It's a whole movie about them falling in love. This is dumb. But then by the end of the film, I was like, I like them now. And I like her.
And then she died.
I'm so mad. You have to understand, all of the characters that I love, they all died. So I'm afraid to
die.
So messed up. I hate it. They always die. So I was like, I can't choose a favorite ever again. They always end up dying.
Well, every time you choose a favorite now, they're gonna
they always die. Yeah, and so I'm like, fuck.
So if you want spoilers, just ask Dai what her favorite character is.
Right. Damn. So I really fell in love with the character throughout her course.
So how much
right?
do you love Yelena?
Oh, miss, don't do that. I know, it's like, and that's what upsets me, right? I was like, oh,
Thunderbolts is coming out.
Bucky, don't die! Don't die!
Someone's gonna die.
It's probably gonna be Bucky. God, Winter Soldier forever. No, don't die. He can't. He's not capable. Dang it. He needs a paycheck. So yeah, I really loved. I thought she was fantastic at her portrayal, even if I didn't love that character. I was like,
Sure.
She's so good at that character though. And yeah, I just always thought she was like super duper ruthless. She was awesome and just powerful. And I do love the fact that she was like, oh no, my father is crazy. I'm going to turn on him. Just wait, and she was just waiting for that moment to really release herself from everything that he'd held her to. And so the growth was unexpected for me because like, again, I didn't know that much about her aside what she explains in the film that my father is a mad titan, da 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 da.
Yeah.
And she's got an insane sister that wants to kill her. And so the way that they kind of introduced her as this really aggressive, like killing machine and then softened her up as like someone who is just figuring things out, especially when it comes to caring about other people, let alone loving somebody. And then, like you said, just full on freaking killing her. I was like, oh, my emotions. I was like, oh, shoot. So when volume 3 came out, I was like, I was already prepared for like, oh, this is going to be hard to digest. Because, yeah, you really like, if you want to talk about 10 years of a character's tenure in the MCU and what they go through and how you've kind of gone along with them, Gamora is definitely one of the ones that is like
she goes
all over the place.
She starts off middle, she goes high, goes all the way low, and then back up high. And it's like, and then volume 3, like, she was tenacious. Like you're like, this is not at all the same Gamora.
Yeah, and and I remember when we first saw it, I was like, it almost completely turned me off on her, especially the part when she has the full-fledged. When she gets in Peter's face, when she's just like, and she's like shrill and she's like screaming at him. Yeah. Like, I don't know what did she say?
Whatever hole you think I filled like in your life.
Why do I need to fill the hole?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
I'm not her.
Yeah.
I'm like, ooh.
Yeah. And then she said, what did she say? She's like, the team didn't make me, like the universe made me, galaxy made me or something. And she's about to punch him. Right there, I was like, I felt my heart drop because I was like, oh, I don't like her anymore. But I digress. She really came back. Because, like we mentioned in our mini Marvel that we just did on volume 3, she does, you do see the remnants of who she was or who we were first introduced to and how she could have eventually come across and had the same sort of path as the Gamora that perished, because you do see her sort of look at Peter different and realize, oh, they are a family. That's really sweet. Yeah. But by this point in that version's time, she's already established herself with the Ravagers. So they are her version of the Guardians. And so, but I will die on the hill that the hallway scene where it's just the most fantastic scene to the Beastie Boys. That Gamora that's the deadliest woman in the galaxy right there. That little sliver, boom. Agreed. That's the character. And so another funny thing is that when I was making the graphics for this episode, I was like, oh man, even looking at the graphics, right? And you look back at volume 1 Gamora and her solo poster, I was like, dang, that is the same Gamora that's in volume 3 now.
Oh, that's crazy.
Right? You think about it, you take out volume 2 and Infinity War and Endgame, and you're like, actually, that makes a lot of sense. If you just jump from there. And I was like, dang, she really did a fantastic job, and I really loved her. What about you?
I love Zoe. Yeah. First of all,
she's great.
She kills it.
Yeah.
But yeah, as a character, Gamora, I loved her journey. I mean, obviously after Infinity War, you're kind of like, okay, well, how is this gonna play out? And it's like devastating. And like now it's like she's not even the same. Yeah. But in James Gunn fashion, I thought it was done really well. Like everybody's stories, including hers. It's like, okay, this is like the wrap up.
Really tied it together.
Yeah, I love her.
Yeah. And it is kind of wild to think about that. It must be such an undertaking for someone like James to be presented with like, here, you have what is quite essentially the lowest of the low teams. And then he built them to the A++ team of the MCU. Yeah. Let's be real. And so much so that they got a ride before anything else, like Disneyland. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense, right? That's the craziest part of it. It's like before Spider-Man, before Avengers Campus, there was a Guardians of the Galaxy ride. That's how big they were. And so to then, like you said, have one of your main characters be killed off in a movie that's out of your hands, like you got to sit in a bit and give some advice, but that was it. And they got to do whatever the hell they wanted with her. It's kind of like, oh my God.
Yeah, it sucks.
It sucks. And of course it changes course for him because, I mean, he has said many times in his interviews that he wrote all 3 volumes ages ago.
Yeah.
Like he has been working with that. But I imagine, like, because, you know, he's a man of technicalities and truths, that he had to have changed things once the Russo brothers were like, so
I think
we're going to kill her.
But I think he also said that Volume 3 was always going to be a Rocket story.
Exactly, yeah.
So I think that's always stayed the same, but it is throwing in the wrinkle of, okay, how do I bring in Gamora into this?
And I think I wrote it, I was going to bring it up later on, but I didn't realize this until my Peter, not Melnick, it's like call him, mentioned. He said to me that he read in one of the recent interviews that Gamora was actually supposed to die in Volume 2. She was going to be the one to sacrifice herself instead of Yondu.
Yes, I
for
think he
Peter.
said he had written like a version.
Yeah, and I was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't even imagine that. But yeah, so apparently Zoe was like, I'm kind of done.
Yeah, because I think that was what he said in the interview.
Yeah.
When he first talked to Gamora,
Yeah.
or talked to Zoe,
Yeah.
she only wanted to play this character for
a
certain
limited
amount
time.
of years.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, we got a full run from her, and I'd say she did fairly
it's
well.
just kind of crazy. Like, we're never gonna see
her
her as Gamora ever again.
So crazy to me.
Sorry, fanboys.
And me.
I'm fine with that.
No, I'm fine with it as well because
that.
I think again, like James did a fantastic job tying it up.
Yeah.
Like it was a satisfying, like Peter said, he said, sad but satisfying. And I said, yeah, you know what? Perfect. It is. It's very true. Like I'm sad I'll never see her again, but she went off pretty damn well.
Yeah.
Are you ready for your one and only pop quiz?
Nope. Because I never get these.
I think you'll get this one. So, did I put volume 3? Okay, I meant volume 1. So what number film is Guardians of the Galaxy volume 1 in the MCU
timeline
release? Not yeah.
You're going to make me do this, huh?
Oh yeah, you're going to do it and you're going to do it and it's going to impress the hell out of everybody.
What number?
What number release? Not in chronological order. Release.
Of MCU.
Of MCU.
So like obviously Iron Man was the first
Correct.
one. Okay.
Yeah. So where is
so
Guardians?
you're gonna make me go.
Because I know you can do it.
Okay. All right, guys.
All right, here we go.
So Guardians of the Galaxy 1.
Correct.
Volume 1 came out in 2014.
Okay.
It was a summer flick. It was a summer flick. Yes. It was a May-June flick, I think. Yes.
It was in April 27th.
So, right before
Yeah. Just before.
Beginning of the summer runs.
Yeah. But 2014 is the year.
2014 was there a beginning of the year flick? I don't think so because they didn't start doing beginning of the year flicks until Black Panther in February.
Jeez.
So Guardians came out summer 2014. Mm-hmm. Iron Man 1 2009. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right. You had this mathematical, like...
Yeah.
You have an actual equation now.
And I think Iron Man was the only film released in 2009 because they didn't know how it was going to do. And then we go to 2010. I think... Did we get Iron Man 2 in 2010? We did get Iron Man 2 in 2010. That's crazy. So then there's only probably like... Oh, that's crazy because then Thor and Captain America were 2011. So we weren't getting multiple MCU movies like first 2 years.
Wasn't Iron Man 1 2008?
Is it 2008?
Yeah.
Pain.
Just add a couple.
Okay. So it was Iron Man. Iron Man 2 came out 2010.
Okay.
100%.
There you go.
See, this is where it gets...
Come on, Jeff.
Look, I gotta... You gotta come because okay. Winter Soldier came out 2014. Ooh, was that before Guardians of the Galaxy? Ooh. Now I'm like, was there like another obscure?
Oh my God.
Did they go from straight up Cap, Thor, Iron Man, and then the Guardians in 2014?
It was pretty.
That's a
barren.
jump.
It was pretty barren.
That's a jump because there's no like Doctor Strange. There's no like other characters that you may have known. Ooh, so I'm just gonna throw out there. Guardians Volume 1 was number 9. Let's go 9. Screw it. Let's just go 9. I don't care. I care, but I don't want to take too much time with this podcast. It's me just thinking.
Let me just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
10. Actually 10. I'm saying 10. Sorry. Let's just go with even number 10. And that will be...
Oh, okay. Here we go. Okay, here we go,
right.
Jeff. Here we go. Here's the final statement. Iron Man 1, 2008. Incredible Hulk. Iron Man 2. Thor. Captain America, the First Avenger. The Avengers. Iron Man 3. Thor Dark World. Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Guardians of the Galaxy. Number 10.
Let's go!
Well done.
Yes.
Well done. But that's crazy, right? Think
Yeah.
of that. You had all these really top tier, universally known characters for a good solid 6 years. And then here they come. Guardians of the Galaxy is coming out 2014. And everyone's
That's
like,
crazy.
who? Yeah, and so they really did change the course and kind of level up the MCU that was already, especially coming down from the Winter Soldier, like holy smokes. And then they pivoted to Guardians. That's something else. Let me tell you, that is not easy. So yeah, well done, Jeff.
Finally.
See, I told you could do it.
You have the bearing of a man of honor.
So powers and paraphernalia when it comes to Gamora. Honestly, like I said to you before the show, before we started recording, very like straight up and down. Same across the board between comics and the movies. And so we don't get as much detail when it comes to the MCU, but in the comics, she has artificially enhanced physiology. So, of course, thanks to Thanos' gifts, quote unquote, Gamora has a number of useful enhancements, which have resulted in, but not limited to, enhanced strength, speed, stamina, agility, reflexes, and durability, as well as regenerative healing factor.
Ooh.
So that aspect, of course, is something that people are like, well, then why did she die in Vormir? And it's like, well, you have to think it's like a 4,000 foot drop.
I mean,
like
yeah.
it's just, she can't, the people can't survive that kind of thing. Let's just be honest. And so in the comics, she is also an accomplished athlete with strengths in gymnastics, hand-to-hand combat, as well as stealth techniques. And of course, is a master martial artist, assassin, weapons master, expert marksman, master tactician, and strategist, and acrobat. And yeah, so same with the MCU. They don't obviously harp on all of those things as much, but you can see it in the way she moves, the way that they escape the kiln. Like she's clearly amazing in hand-to-hand combat.
Oh yeah.
She can take multiple adversaries at a time, and she's very, very tactful with the way she does things. In Volume 2, you could see she's very agile, and she can leap and bound pretty long distances. And yeah, in Volume 3, you really see her come to, you know, her truest form when she slices that Chewbacca octopus thing in half with her blade. And yeah, she's badass. What can we say? And so, yeah, definitely my favorite and I think most representational version of the character in both aspects is that hallway scene. I'll die on that hill. And so beyond all that, she doesn't have any actual, like, she doesn't have any powers, so to speak, but there's a fun fact and known sort of quirk that she and Thanos shared, like, a rapport. So like when they actually spent time together after he had raised her, they kind of forged telepathic links, so he always knew what she was up to in a weird way. And I feel like they played upon that a bit in Infinity War. especially when they're like reunited and he's got her on Titan and all that scary stuff. But I think they do play a little bit on it, and whether or not that's intentional or if it's kind of a callback to the comics, not sure, but it kind of tracks with me. And so aesthetic, I didn't go into detail too much, but you can see this on our doc, Jeff.
Yeah.
When you first meet her,
that's insane.
Her suit it's not a suit at all. It's just it's a fleshy fishnet thing that just goes over her skin. And so I would assume that is entirely see-through. And so it's just a dark green mesh that goes over her already green flesh. She's got like a black fur cape of sorts, and she wears a well-positioned brooch over her lady bits. So she was very much, easily said, if you look at the first three alone, very, very sexualized in the comics when it came to her aesthetic. But that was part of the charm, right? Like she could woo you, but I mean, before
she also
you
like murder you.
Yeah, she will quite literally murder you if you even look at her the wrong way. And yeah, she did have a phase where like the black of her outfit was imbued with like cosmic power or cosmic, I don't know, reflection, if you will. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until the more modern books that they introduced just a full-fledged suit for her, which is more tactical and battle ready. And it does have the colors that we now know, which are the maroon and blue, which is definitely a more modern take. She dons the colors and it clashes with her a bit. Funny enough, like Drax says, red clashes with him in Volume 3.
Yeah.
But it definitely suits the character, I feel. I like the cosmic look on her, but I like her more modern outfits. There is even one that resembles the movie one a little bit. She's kind of got a midriff still, but the cut of it is very interesting. And she also had a cape, like an actual hooded cape. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was just the coolest look for her. And I was always hoping to see it in the films, but I'll never get that now, so it's okay. But you will see the last suit that I have on our doc. It's a white, black, and red suit. That one is, I think, most reminiscent in the video game. And so that's the more like angled, sort of broad-shouldered soldier look that she has in the video games, which is really cool. Very space-like, if you will. And of course, paraphernalia isn't so much other than, blades, swords, space guns, and the like. But the Godslayer is a major player, and it does what it says. Let's just say that. And so that's her most well-known blade. That she has throughout both the film and the comics. And so, yeah, let's just roll into family, friends, and affiliations. So, oh boy. The Guardians of the Galaxy is an easy one. Her relationships with the comic book counterparts of the Guardians has its differences and similarities to the films. They did foster relationships, and some dynamics are better than others between the two. But there's a character in the comics that I wanted to briefly talk about that Gamora is more or less best friends with, and her name is Angela. But the funny thing about Angela is, and let me tell you, like, this character is primed for the MCU, but whether or not they'll actually debut her is kind of, I personally am not sure if they could drop her in just anywhere.
Yeah.
Because the funny thing about this character is that she was a character that originally came from Image Comics. And do you know Spawn?
Yeah.
She's from the Spawn world.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, and so she was created by comic book legends and rivals, Neil Gaiman and Todd McFarlane. And so those are two very prominent people in the world of comics for their respective reasons. And Neil Gaiman is very well known for Sandman, for instance, and then Todd McFarlane is known for Spawn. And so they created this character who's very statuesque. She's very warrior looking. She's like 90% naked, but that's the 90s for you. And but her tenure under Image, they kind of had a falling out of sorts.
Got it.
And so Todd McFarlane was like, I don't want to give Neil Gaiman money for what he wrote, how he created her. Like, they had a creator spat. Let's just say that.
Okay.
And so anyway, Neil Gaiman ultimately, I think he bought the rights from Todd McFarlane. Oh no, sorry. Marvel purchased the rights from Neil Gaiman, who got them from Todd McFarlane eventually.
Okay.
And so by 2013, Marvel had acquired this character fully. Like, she was officially theirs, and they made her Asgardian. They changed it up a bit.
Wow.
And they added her to that realm. And so there are, the Guardians intermingle again with all of the characters that we already know in some capacity, and Asgardians are in and out for obvious reasons because they are of space and all that good stuff. And so Angela and Gamora get along very well in the comics, and they're both these heavy-handed warrior women that simply don't take anybody's BS. And so I was really, I would love to see that character in the films. Whether or not they'll ever have her, who knows? Maybe she'll be the new presence of Thor. She'll fill the hole that Thor will inevitably leave behind. But who knows? If they need more space people, she's definitely a great candidate. But of course, the Guardians of the Galaxy in the films, portrayed by Chris Pratt, Bradley Cooper, Vin Diesel, Pom Clementif, Michael Rooker, and Sean Gunn. So the roster changes left and right in the comics, but they have had most of the team that we see in the films, at least the Fab Five. Yondu and Kraglin were not really, and Nebula were not really part of the comic book versions at all. They just really capitalized on those big five. But yeah, I mean, what more is there to say about their overall dynamic other than we've already said, even in our mini Marvels, that they become her chosen family for different reasons, even though she hated them all for different reasons. But they become that chosen family that is so well replicated in the films. And yeah, they do have a bit of that in the comics as well. Someone we did want to mention on the side was Nebula, of course. And I when I was doing this homework, I was just like, I just feel like they're just too similar. There's not that much difference between both versions, at least in the comics and the films, because the relationship is incredibly similar. They're deadly against one another. They in the comics, it's much more brutal. Like, they do cut into each other with blades, and they punch each other full force, and they knock each other's teeth out. But they've definitely historically been physically abusive and wildly competitive. I feel both versions in the comic are much more deadly than they are represented in the films, and that's probably for a number of reasons. PG-13 being one of them, but yeah, I think other than that, they're pretty darn similar. And funny enough, during the Infinity Gauntlet storyline, Nebula is the one to thank. And I think I mentioned this in a while back, that she actually gets the gauntlet in the comics. And so after Thanos has already destroyed half of the universe, she revives them. So in a way, she saved Gamora's life, because Gamora had died by that point. So she has some redeeming qualities in the comics, even though she is not quite her sister. So of course, Nebula, portrayed by Karen Gillan. I didn't write anything in our notes except for, I wanted a sister. That's all it is. That's all that it was, really. And also the ownership of herself, and to prove that she was worthy, right? So yeah, what did you like about Gamora and Nebula, if anything?
I mean, I love that arc in general.
Yeah.
Like, stemming from Volume 1 all the way to Volume 3. It's kind of incredible.
Yeah.
Like, how it's kind of developed.
Yeah.
So I loved where it ended up, and they actually were they're close.
Yeah. And I think that's something that people overlook, right? They're just like, why are they grunting at each other? But it's like, actually, if you think about it, that simple gesture to one another is like, it underscores the fact that they have found a camaraderie, that they are sisters. And she even says, and again, it's one of those throwaway lines, after the Peter Quill incident, and Gamora says, "I'm family," and Nebula says, "And so is he."
Yeah.
And that's like, whoa.
That's huge.
Yeah. And so it's very interesting that they have established that very, very sharply throughout the course of their storyline, but definitely in volume 3, and they came a long way. And of course, stemming from the Infinity War interactions, I feel like those ones are overlooked quite a bit because, I feel like Gamora overall was just, everybody was so focused on the fact that Black Widow was killed off in Endgame that they didn't even think back to Gamora's sacrifice in the first film. Mm-hmm. And how when they did go back in time and the whole Nebula switch out was so impactful, I think, to that character. And even then, that they were, like Gamora says to her, like, in the future, what happens to us?
Yeah.
And she's like, we become friends. Sisters, whatever she said. And a lot of that plays into, of course, how they get along in the future, which was volume 3. They're definitely not like in that sort of place in the books at all. I don't remember where Nebula last was, but she did have a solo title a year or two ago, which was pretty great. Just really giving her own voice and setting her apart from just being Gamora's sister and Thanos's sad daughter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they're very well represented in the films in a lovable sense. And who knows if we'll see Nebula again or in some fashion.
Yeah. I don't know.
I know she wants to play her some more, but whether or not she'll actually get to is another story.
Yeah.
Touch me, and the only thing you're gonna feel is a broken jaw.
So when it comes to notable adversaries, like many of these characters, especially with Gamora being galaxy adjacent, she has a lot of foes in the galaxy. However, honorable mentions go to Annihilus, Ultron, strangely enough, this thing called the Cancerverse. It is what it is. It is what it sounds like. And even Jason of Spartax, who, if you remember, is Peter Quill's biological father.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But there are a couple that I wanted to call out, as well as the ones that we do meet in the MCU. Starting with, of course, the Universal Church of Truth in the comics. As previously mentioned, again, the church was instrumental in Thanos' lust for power and death, and they worshiped the Magus and the future doppelganger of evil Adam Warlock. And so we don't have an MCU counterpart. However, like I mentioned, there is a video game version of the Universal Church of Truth. And they made a very impressionable debut in the gaming universe with that storyline. They not only introduced the Magus as well, who is Warlock in the game, but they also introduced the Matriarch, who they amalgamated. So the Matriarch, we won't go down this path too long, but the Matriarch is an existing character in the Marvel Comics universe. Mm-hmm. In the game, they changed it to Nikki Gold, who is also a comic book character from the Guardians as well.
Yes.
So that whole thing, it is interesting. They do touch on not only Nebula and Gamora's story, but the Warlock aspect. So I don't think we'll ever see that in in the MCU proper. Whereas there are the Badoon. And so in the comics, they're reptilian species that conquered Earth in the 31st century, which ultimately led to the creation of the original Guardians of the Galaxy. And so I wanted to mention this because this throws back to the MCU as well. So the very, very, very first original Guardians of the Galaxy team consisted of members Vance Astro, Martinex Tanaga. Does Martinex ring a bell at all?
Kind of.
And so that is he's more prominent. He's prominent is in volume 2 and 3. He has more speaking lines in 3, but he is that crystal person. That is Martinex. And so that he is played by Michael Rosenbaum.
That's who he's played by.
Yeah, that's Rosie. So Martinex, Captain Charlie 27. Charlie 27 is the key word, so to speak. And he appears at the end of volume 2, and he is played by Ving Rhames. Fare thee well, Yondu Odonta, or whatever he says. Yeah, that's Captain Charlie 27. And then, of course, speaking of Yondu Odonta, played by Michael Rooker. So those four characters were the original Guardians of the Galaxy. And so that's why James Gunn was like, I'm going to pay homage to the originals and put them in that last scene from Volume 2.
Got it.
Yeah. And so anyway, back to the Badoon. So while again, there's no formal counterpart for the Badoon in the MCU, they were apparently intended to show up in Thor Dark World. And so, you know how those weird looking, those Ninja Turtle looking things are?
Yeah.
So those, they were, supposed to be Badoon instead of Sicarians in Guardians Volume 1. And so I guess it was a rights issue. So that's the whole Fox thing. Fox had they had the rights to these Badoon people.
How do people even keep track of this
so
stuff?
Bizarre, right? I was like, oh my goodness, of all character rights, the Badoon were owned by Fox. And so James Gunn apparently also wanted to have the Badoon in Volume 1, but couldn't get the rights, just like Thor Dark World. And he had to replace those characters with the Sicarians, which are those, listen to me, you ugly Ninja Turtle. No, what does he say?
That's right.
Yeah. Let's get your hands off me, you giant Ninja Turtle. Those were supposed to be Badoon, but they're Sicarians. So yeah, we have not seen them yet. Maybe we will in the future in some galactic form. I bet probably the Marvels at some point. But someone we do see in the films, who is also in the comic books, is Ronan the Accuser. And so he's not a primary adversary by any means. And like we've said many times before, they don't even have a direct correlation like many of the other heroes and adversaries do. These two, they more or less collided when storylines happen. And they just happen to be in the same place. But they did, however, butt heads in an arc by the name of Annihilation. And so Annihilation was spearheaded by the villain I previously mentioned, Annihilus. And he had this army from the Negative Zone, which is, that's, God. I don't even want to go into it. It's so dense. But so Ronan and Korath, yes, that Korath, the Pursuer, they squared off against members of this group called Gamora's Graces. And so it's a very short-lived team that consisted of Ceres, Nebula, a character named Stellaris, Spirit, and a character named Tananile. And so these were basically like Charlie's Angels in a weird way.
Sure.
But for Gamora, right? They worked with Gamora. And so anyway, Gamora's team battled with Ronan, and that's really the extent of interaction that they have in the comics. Whereas, of course, in the MCU, Ronan the Accuser, portrayed by Lee Pace, my goodness, amazing character actor in his own right. And as we see from Volume 1, both Nebula and Gamora seemingly sided with Ronan, but they were only there to intercept the Power Stone at the time, per Thanos' order. But yeah, other than that, they didn't, after Volume 1, they just kind of never collided again, I guess. And of course, the Ronan we see is past tense, so in Captain Marvel and such. So they weren't present at the time. But yeah, nothing much there as far as overlap. Same goes for Ego, actually. So in the comics, while Gamora has a few run-ins with Ronan, she's had even less with Ego, who, of course, in the MCU is portrayed by Kurt Russell. And, not much to say on him at the moment, but, he was Peter Quill's and Mantis's biological father. And he was a planet and killer of hopes and dreams, and Peter's mom. And yeah, there's not much to say about Ego. That's about it. But someone we could talk about at fuller length, of course, is Thanos. In the comics, there's not too much more to expand on, given how we started at the top of the show. But Thanos, like many adversaries in general, is a constant thorn in Gamora's side, recurring when least expected. And their dynamic is I mean, I'd say the film's nailed it. Gamora more or less loathes Thanos in her own way, but she also has him to thank for her endurance and her strength and her abilities, both physically and also, emotionally and mentally. She's actually quite a brick wall, but that's because Thanos pretty much bred her to be that way. And in the books, so after she realizes after meeting Warlock, to begin with, that Thanos, his ambition and tyranny they were absolutely the wrong side of history. She realized, like, no, we really are the bad guys, and I don't want to be a bad guy. So that more or less empowers Gamora to go rogue, very much like she does in the film. When she goes and does work for Ronan at the end of the day, it's all because it's her plan to thwart Thanos. Yeah. And so she does that in the comics as well. But of course, in the comics, that changed with Infinity Wars, which I think I mentioned in our Star-Lord episode. So what happens is that Gamora more or less has this fixation for the Infinity Stones for herself. And she not only killed, but she beheaded Thanos in the comics, adopting the namesake Requiem, which is pretty badass, actually. That's pretty cool. Her suit was very interesting. She did have, again, this like hooded cape, and she wore this like face goggle thing. I guess I didn't put it in aesthetics, but she wore this face goggle thing, mask, that you couldn't even tell was her. And the suit was so bulky, it almost came across that she could have been a male figure. But yeah, she went on this killing spree in Infinity Wars, and then she then with the stone, she got the stones, and with the time stone folded time on top of itself, and she created this thing called Warp World. And so they had to undo all of that, and of course when all was said and done, she was thankfully defeated. But they didn't like do away with her. She just returned back to the Guardians of the Galaxy, and she just realized, okay, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. My bad. And they get on with their lives. But of course, Thanos, primarily portrayed by Josh Brolin, we all know what happened there. He came to Zen-Huberi. He killed or neutralized half of the planet. Unfortunately, Gamora's family was part of that, and then he took Gamora for himself.
Yikes.
Along with Nebula. I'd like to see a baby Nebula, though. Why didn't they show a baby Nebula? So cute. But she would have looked very different, too.
100%.
She would have been all blue, because the purple, like the other nuances, again, those were all added by him, after the fact. But she would have been blue, and she would have had black hair. She had black hair in the comics. Yeah. And then blonde, and what if you want to follow that. Yeah. But yeah, again, same thing. She wanted to overthrow her father and end his conquest for power. And then he threw off a freaking mountain for the Soul Stone like a jerk.
I agree.
God.
It's kind of messed up.
It's very messed up. Like the fact that he even still kind of cried about it. I was like, shut up. You don't mean it. You don't mean it.
You just wanted the stone,
No, you freaking... So yeah, that's it as far as adversaries go. And, like in the third film, I mean, they do go against the High Evolutionary. Yeah. Which is another thing entirely. But, I think he skews very much in Rocket's territory. And so we've talked about him a little bit in our Rocket Raccoon character study. But yeah, that's more or less her big baddies across both boards.
What do you do with it?
Do? Nothing. You listen to it. Or you can dance.
I'm a warrior and an assassin. I do not dance.
And then, for love interests, it's almost a little more, it's got a little more meat to it for different reasons. But, Gamora's had her fair share of flings and romances, if you will, including that notorious one-nighter that she had with Tony Stark in the comics, which is really funny. Yeah. Because it's just like, it's so funny because once you see the panel, you can't unsee it. And it's not for the reasons that you think, but it's because he's literally in bed with her. She's like, kind of bored. You kind of get the idea she's bored, and she's in her underwear, and he's clearly like naked under the blankets, and she's just like, I'm gonna go get a drink, okay? And he's like, yeah, cool. And she gets up, she leaves, and the minute she leaves and she's out of the room, he just goes, ow. Just like, God, what'd she do to him? But anyway, the more or less notable romances that Gamora has in the comic books do include Peter Quill, but not nearly to the extent of what we have seen on film. And so you can, of course, revisit the character study from episode 17, all about Peter Quill and Star-Lord. But the two in the comics didn't have any true romantic linkage until super duper recently. And even then, no true inclinations occurred until the MCU lineup. So it's one of those things, again, like I said before, the team itself has changed over the last few decades, right? It's been very different characters, but it wasn't the same lineup as the one in the MCU until the 2010s. And so it wasn't until then also that they even introduced the fact that, hey, what about Peter Quill and Gamora as a concept? And so nothing really happened until the last couple years of comic books, believe it or not. So it took a good 10 years for them to even actually have something. And even then, it's still kind of like at a standstill, doesn't really grow in the ways that it could. And I believe it's all but abandoned at this point. But yeah, they some liberties from the MCU, Gamora is applied in the books, and so there's a little bit there. And of course, again, Peter Quill, Star-Lord in the MCU, portrayed by Chris Pratt. And in my notes, because I knew I was just going to say the same thing I've said in our mini Marvel, I just went, wah, with a sad face because I didn't like them. Then I fell in love with them. And then
now they don't exist.
They're done. I said to someone, I was like, can you believe that the MCU granted us one of the best, perhaps one of the best couples that they've had in their universe, period.
Yeah.
Took it away from us. And then we're left with couples like Scott Lang and Hope Van Dyne to lead the charge. It's like, okay, well, maybe that's what makes it so good, is that it doesn't exist. It's not forever. The ephemeral form. And then another interesting notable is, and I've said this before, Adam Warlock. So,
insane.
Yeah. So if you will, entertain me, instead of seeing Adam Warlock and Gamora like fighting with each other over, a gutted badger and a tiny furry blurp, imagine them in an actual relationship. It's kind of bizarre.
That's insane.
So while this relationship in the comics was very much a past tense thing, it emerged between storylines, Infinity Gauntlet and Infinity Watch, both of which I feel contributed a lot to the Infinity War film we now know. And so, as you can imagine, the Infinity Gems or the stones were involved. And after Thanos killed Gamora, it was Warlock who used his soul gem. So I've mentioned this before.
Yep.
He has possession of the soul gem in the comics, or at least did. And so he used his power to absorb Gamora's last remaining life force before she was completely, I don't want to say dusted, because she wasn't really dusted in the comics, but the equivalent of dusted. And then he transported her to Soul World. And so I said this in our mini Marvel, where I was like, when I had my first assumptions of like, oh my God, they killed her in Infinity War. What if they introduced Adam Warlock in Endgame, and then he was part of reviving her? Like he was the reason that she was revived at all in Endgame. But of course they didn't do that. But he has the power to the soul world. And so over time in the comics, Gamora developed feelings for Warlock, and they were reciprocated, but didn't seem to last beyond those storylines. So it was kind of it was one and done. Of course, Adam and Warlock, portrayed by Will Poulter in the MCU. And again, no romantic link whatsoever in the film, and he's just a baby. So, he's barely born. And then the near entire origin of his character in the MCU has been changed. So who knows where he's going? Will we see him again? I don't know. I think there's a 50-50 chance. But yeah, who knows? We'll see. And then there's Richard Rider, Nova, who's perhaps the most prominent love interest for Gamora in the comics.
I wonder if we'll ever see him in the MCU.
I think there's definitely a great chance for him. So very quickly, Richard Rider, he received his powers from a dying Nova Corps Centurion by the name of Roman Day. And so if that name sounds familiar at all, Roman Day is portrayed by John C. Reilly in Volume 1.
That's right.
Yeah. So in the comics, that character gave Richard Rider his powers. So it was, I believe he was dying, and so he imbued a random Earther with his powers, and it happened to be Richard Rider, and he became Nova. And so, contrary to many a belief, Richard Rider is Gamora's primary love interest when it comes to the source material. So those two met during the Annihilation War story that we mentioned earlier, where she went head to head with Ronan. Mm-hmm. And so, in the beginning, it was more or less a lustful relationship, totally based on one thing.
Nice.
But,
nice.
And that's for Gamora, because apparently, Gamora is very risque in the comics. But Richard wanted more from her, and she was just kind of like, no, I'm good. We're good as this goes. And so, of course, as fate would have it, the duo were kind of like put through the ringer with one another, and it really put their relationship to the test. And so they got infected with this thing called the transmode virus. And so it's something that I've mentioned the phalanx before, but the phalanx are essentially these techno organic alien race in the books. Mm-hmm. And so they almost look like motherboards. They can move and stuff, but they have that very distinct pattern of metal and
okay.
And so they're always shown as like yellow for some reason. I don't know why. But anyway, they got Gamora and Richard got this virus, and so she was essentially dying, and then he wanted to save her. Then he got it too, but then they were both cured at the end of the storyline, and then she then questioned like, well, that brought us together, but now we don't have to take care of each other. So do I have to take care of him? She basically saw that there was no purpose to be with him after they had both figured it out. And then, of course, the overlap of Adam Warlock in the picture. And so Richard really had some like doubts of like, does she love me or does she want to be with him? And it turned into a love triangle. Nevertheless, they joined and rejoined the Guardians of the Galaxy. Do you remember that outtake from Volume 2?
Which one?
Who are the Guardians of the Galaxy? It's like Guardians. That's what I said. Just Guardians, and it was Guardians of the Galaxy, but it was Nebula who said it. It's like an outtake. Oh my god, I just said it. So they rejoined the Guardians of the Galaxy together, and so they were sort of on and off for a while. I don't know where they are now, because then the whole Peter Quill thing came back, and so then it changed from a love triangle between Warlock and Adam Warlock, Richard Rider, and Gamora to Peter Quill, Gamora, and Richard Rider.
Jeez.
I don't know what's happening anymore, but needless to say, there was no Richard Rider in the MCU. I feel like the Nova Corps is not over. I feel like they're going to come back in some way, and I think Richard Rider is going to be a big part of that.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't know who, what, where, when. I don't know. We'll see. And then that brings us to other versions and in other media. So actually, this is quite a lot of the detail of this character is in the other versions of her. And so I wanted to cover this very quickly. So there's a character or variant of Gamora known as Madame Gamora, spelled like the biblical version. Yeah. Hailing from Earth 311. And so she's also regarded as Earth 1602. And so 1602, we've only mentioned once in our What If episode. And that is because in season 2 of What If, they're introducing characters from Earth 1602. And so that is essentially an Earth that takes place in the year of the same name. So it's a character that comes from the year 1602. And so though canonically still Earth 616. Jesus. So it's Earth 616, but in the year 1602. So that Gamora, her name is a derivative of the biblical version, and that whole story is the Gamora of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so these are the two ancient cities near the Dead Sea that were destroyed by God as punishment for the wickedness of their inhabitants. So they basically died for their sins, quite literally. And so that's from Genesis 19:24. And so, because that name is it rings a lot of bells for people who know the Bible and its stories, but the spelling is obviously so different. So it was kind of a question for many people, like, is this supposed to be like, is that what it is? And so I looked it up, and the question was Gamora as a character based on this biblical reference? And so I found a response from, I believe I don't know who it was, but this fellow was like apparently a really nerdy paleontologist, which I was like, same. And so he wrote this really good response to kind of answer that. And it also gives insight to like Gamora as a character as well as Jim Starlin. So he answered, it was probably intentional. So Jim Starlin, who created Gamora, is known for incorporating biblical themes into his stories and combining them with mythology and his own cynical twist. So it wouldn't surprise me if Gamora's name were a reference to the biblical city of Gamora. His comics are full of wordplay. The name of Gamora's people, the Zen-Huberis, is thought to be a play on Zen hubris. So the illusion of Gamora makes more sense when you consider that in the original version of her backstory, her people were wiped out by a group calling themselves the Universal Church of Truth, which cynically draws a parallel to the story of Gamora and God's judgment. In fact, the story in which Gamora first appeared was called The Judgment. And Jim Starlin often used his comics to express his frustration with Christianity and organized religion in general. So this just might be another example. However, there are not many parallels between Gamora and Gomorrah. Beyond that, it is still unclear whether or not the biblical allusion was intentional. So, why is Gamora? There you go. There it is.
Yeah, that's it right there.
There it is. So it's very interesting. So I never really looked at it that deeply, right? Because there are always names that kind of like ring a bell, and you're like, is that like Thor is a glaring one,
obviously,
big one, right? Yeah. And of course that's of Norse mythology. But yeah, what about other religions? And so that really makes a lot of sense. So if you go back and read these galactic universe stories, tons and tons and tons of references, even with Rocket Raccoon.
Yeah.
And they had that whole, Gideon's Bible thing and how that was turned into a Beatles song. It's like, okay, there you go. Well, there it is. But yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. And so there is an actual Gamora based off of, that biblical spelling.
Yeah.
But that's more or less, that's it. And so another interesting version of the character, of course, is in the video games. And so while she's featured in a number of them, her two most recent appearances on mainstream platforms are Marvel vs. Capcom Infinity, which I love to talk about, as well as Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, where she's fantastic, as well as Gamora's Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, where she's voiced by Vanessa Marshall and Kimberly Sue Murray. In an animation, she's got quite a few appearances, which is kind of surprising because, again, I don't personally keep up with all the cartoon stuff, but she's got so many appearances there, and so there's the site called Behind the Voice Actors that features a list of nearly 30 people who have played Gamora in some fashion in animation, but one of them stands out among the rest, and this, of course, is the portrayal of Earth 32938, aka What If? Whoa. Where she was voiced by Cynthia McWilliams in lieu of Zoe Saldana. So yeah, we haven't yet we got sniped that her episode, her origin story in What If, how she becomes what appears to be the version of Thanos. In What If, we didn't get to see that episode, so it's going to be in season 2. But yeah, so hopefully that'll kick off the new season arriving at some point. Don't even know if it's this year anymore, but
yeah, I don't know either. I haven't seen or heard anything.
Nothing. So hopefully it's coming out in the next year. And that leaves us to future of the character in the MCU. And so easily said, I believe we have seen the last of Gamora. She's gone. She's
Forever.
gone. Yeah. We still have the What If version, but it's nothing.
No,
That's a grain of salt in a giant ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree.
So she
I
gone.
think this is the first time we actually can say
she's gone.
I don't think we're gonna see her.
Never. We're never
ever.
getting her. Yeah, she's gone. That's really upsetting. But yeah, that's it. That's all it is. And so, but another interesting fact before we finish here, almost was, this list is interesting. Because in my eyes, Gamora is definitely one of those characters where I'm just like, I could not see anybody playing her. Like, it's really difficult, especially with what it all entails. And so, among the actresses tapped or at least auditioning for Gamora were Gina Carano of The Mandalorian.
Okay.
Yeah, very interesting. Adrian Palicki, who ended up playing Bobby Morse in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yes.
Interesting. Rosario Dawson.
Oh wow.
Claire Temple herself. Tandy Newton from Westworld.
Okay.
She's the mother of Nico, who played Sarah in The Last of Us. Elizabeth Banks, aka Betty Brant from Spider-Man.
Wow.
Yeah. And of course, Hunger Games and such. Amanda Seyfried, who is the big one. She's the one that was like, yeah, I auditioned and it was not for me.
That's insane.
And I'm like, thank you. Because imagine, I know she's not her character from
Mean Girls?
Mean Girls. No, she's not at all. She's not her character from the Theranos biopic.
Yeah.
But she is a fantastic actress. I just couldn't imagine.
Yeah, I agree.
Her as Gamora. And then, of course, there is, last but not least, Olivia Wilde.
I feel like she's like
Yeah.
always in like the bucket for a
The
lot of these.
Yeah, I think they were trying really hard and then just like nothing fit. And I'm just kind of like, that's cool. I'm Team Flo anyway, so it doesn't matter.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So interesting, right? But they all have sort of the similarities of either very tall and pretty athletic or slender with good hair, kind of. But yeah, I'm glad Zoe got it. And then, of course, we got a listener question from Ariel Tima. Amanda Seyfried was offered the role. Do you think she would have been a good fit?
Like immediately? Like no.
No.
I'm not saying that doesn't detract from her being an amazing actor.
For sure. Yeah,
but
not at all. I just don't.
I can't put it
No. 2
and 2 together.
Yeah, same here. I think Tandy Newton would have been pretty good. But there's like of course, there's a certain ferocity in the way that Zoe portrays characters that it's so unique and specific to her. It's almost difficult to really find who measures up to her in that way. Like, forget about the physical looks and attributes. It's really about that. And I think that's what made her such a great candidate for the characters that she does have. And it's consistent with most of her characters, right? Like Columbiana is like, have you seen that movie? She's fantastic in that film.
I haven't seen the movie, but I've seen.
She's great in that film. And so, but there are a few actresses that I think could have measured up, but I think she's definitely still number one. Amanda, she's been interesting, but definitely not my top 5, let alone 10, I think. And so with that, suggested reading. So this was kind of tough for me because I just wanted to be like everything. But I wanted to focus more on the stuff that actually features her and she's not just in the background. So Gamora, the solo series, 2016, from the team Nicole Perlman, Marco Cicchetto, who's one of my favorite artists, Andres Mosa, and Isar Ibik. And then, so that series explored the rewrite of Gamora's origin story, and her place with both Thanos and Nebula is really beautifully told and illustrated. So definitely try that. Infinity Wars, and so that's the one where she's Requiem, 2017 from Team Jerry Duggan and Mike Deodato Jr. And yeah, so that's the one where she pursued the Infinity Gems and also wore the armor of so I mentioned the armor, right? So it's very strange looking, but so it apparently belonged to a Nidavellir dwarf who went by the name Requiem, and she went by the name Requiem as a result of that. So yeah, it's a very interesting story. It's pretty short, but a good read. Guardians of the Galaxy 2013 run from Brian Michael Bendis, Steve McNiven, John Dell, and Justin Ponser, as well as the 2018 run from Jerry Duggan, Aaron Cooter, Fraser Irving, Chris Samney, and Greg Smallwood. And then I wanted to give an honorable mention to the 2021 Gamora and Nebula Sisters in Arms young adult novel by Mackenzie Lee. So again, it's a complete opposite, right? There's no pictures. So you have to use your imagination. And it's pretty good. It takes place when they're a bit younger. They're both set out to compete against one another once again. It's all about the Grandmaster and Thanos just putting bets on who could succeed between the two sisters, and they really go through the ringer, but it's really fantastically written. Definitely suggest it. And so with that is the end of the show.
Wow.
Yeah, for sure. So thanks for listening. Our next episode. So again, the timing is it's going to get a little wonky. So,
oh, wow, it is.
So our special on-site recording is our next episode at the Natural History Museum. So if you're in or around town and you come join us live. We'd love to have you on mic. A reminder, it's Friday, June 2nd, and tickets are available at nhm.org/firstfridays. And so that said, it does take place on a Friday before our drop day, so that could impact our publish date. So please stay tuned on social media just in case we end up releasing it a little bit later than usual, but we promise it'll still be out. And then with that, We Are Groot salute to Eve, Laura, Ashley, Claire, Katie, Andrea, the Arachnid, Ariel, Joliz, Tyler, Sherry, Robin, Jenny, Andrew, Ed, Melanie, and Nats. Follow us on social at STRKCNTRST. And if you like what you hear, review, rate, and subscribe.
Woo!
That's the end of the show.
Once again, thanks for listening, and we will catch y'all in the next one.
Catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.
The entire time I knew Thanos, he only ever had one goal.
To bring balance to the universe by wiping out half of all life.
He used to kill people planet by planet, massacre by massacre.
Including my own.
If he gets all 6 Infinity Stones, he can do it with the snap of his fingers like this.
You seem to know a great deal about Thanos. Gamora is the daughter of Thanos.